Hi, I'm Brocarde. I've always had such a desire and craving for adventure, the mentality to at least try to venture where few have ventured before. That alone sounds like a recipe for trouble and disaster, but I love the person I am when I'm traveling and exploring, and uninhibited by the confines of everyday life. For many years, I've been fascinated by creating visuals and imagery. For me, it's a way of performing, expressing, and storytelling. I always have so many stories to tell, but like people, places often have stories to tell too. Sometimes they are surrounded in history, and sometimes, if you're lucky, you can step into them for a heartbeat to create a new fairy tale. I always feel that there's a beauty to be found in darkness. Admittedly, there's sometimes just darkness, but seeing the beauty in sadness and decay often breathes a new life into it and turns something negative into positivity and creativity. I travel endlessly and often intentionally. Whilst I'm a sucker for a 5-star hotel and a good cocktail, the best places are often over-visited, overshared, and overexposed. There's nothing wrong with that on many levels, but in a world where we take a photo of a meal before devouring our first mouthful, it can be scary, especially if you overthink it. I live for locations that are off the tourist trail. Sadly, they rarely exist. In the age of the internet, everything is shared and there's nothing that can't be found. On a recent trip to Oslo, I found myself dancing along the Swedish border. Not literally, I barely had the energy after a 5 a.m. flight, even after drowning myself in espresso. I stumbled upon the most amazing car graveyard, hidden deep in the heart of the forest. I rarely gasp out loud, but as we drove around a sharp corner, a sea of cars came into view. I don't think I've ever seen so many vehicles in one place. There were just rows and rows of vintage rusting cars, dating back from the 40s, 50s and 60s, all covered in moss and rust, many completely overtaken by nature, with trees and shrubs growing out of the bonnets and windows. It was unlike anything I've ever encountered before. The vehicles sprawled across what once used to be the lawns and gardens of 2 boarded-up houses, and dozens were hidden in the dense surrounding woodlands, silently crying out from the undergrowth. The houses were rustic, put politely. Realistically, they were decaying, abandoned wooden shacks with threadbare curtains and boarded-up windows. Downstairs, at least, the upstairs windows were open, gasping for air, almost like me, with my heart loudly beating, as I had almost certainly stepped into the scene of a potential horror movie. All I needed now was an axe-wielding lumberjack and it would have been game over. There was not a soul in sight to hear my screams. I had so many questions, but there was nobody to answer them, so I let my imagination unravel and created my own fairy tale or horror story. Fueled by intrigue, I decided to research the location. There is speculation that the cars were once owned by the US military and had been abandoned after the Second World War. I thought their proximity to the border was interesting. That set my imagination alight. It has been documented that the houses are owned by 2 reclusive brothers. Realistically, you'd have to be fairly reclusive to live in an area like this, as there's no dive bars or flamboyant nightclubs to add sparkle to the night. I suspect a lot of the reports are Chinese whispers or purely speculative, because it would be fairly easy to build a picture of who once lived here. I say once, as today there was little sign of life. Although it's widely reported that this message was once nailed to the door of one of the buildings. This car cemetery is private property. You may still look, take pictures, but do not take away any parts. Do not destroy or in any other way disrupt this place. If you open a car door, please shut it again, so your next visitor gets the same experience as you did. For info, after about 30 burglaries this year, I'm fed up with it. I've made traps in the buildings, so if you get hurt or die, I don't care. Remember, in this place, no one can hear you scream. This message echoed my first haunting thought. I was in a place where no one could hear me scream, and on that note, I felt it time to depart and return to humanity. If this message from the owners was authentic, I was very obedient. My only interest was capturing photos and being creative. My luggage was already overweight, so there was zero chance of me running off with a rusty exhaust and cramming it into my hand luggage. It made me smile though, with its sadistic undertones and mentions of booby traps. I imagined it being written by an aging Macaulay Culkin, and I had zero desire to become part of a real-life Home Alone movie or real-life American Horror Story. In the middle of everywhere, for some is nowhere. Off the beaten track often lies land where you can hear your heartbeat. Out of sync with normality, miles from humanity. A challenge to the notion that you need to see life to feel alive. A breath of air without suffocation. The menacing fear of what lurks behind an unopened door. What am I running from? Who am I running for? Perhaps all I'm craving is a world to explore.